All right, let's get started. So again, welcome to the call. My name is Simone Turek. I'm the Associate Policy Director with the John Burton Foundation. And before we dive in, there's always just a few logistical things that we go over. And as you see on your screen, there's call-in information. If you are listening through your computer speakers and you aren't getting great audio, we suggest switching to your telephone. It's just a kind of a better way to get the audio quality sound. And so this information, if later in the presentation you should need it, it is in the email that GoToWebinar sends you a day and also an hour before the webinar. So if you go back, you can access the phone number and the access code right there. Throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, we'd love for you to submit them. Please just use the control panel on the right side of your screen and hit send, and we will address them during the Q&A. And
hello?
as always,
Simone, can you hear me? Did you press star one? Did you press star one?
I can.
That's, people can't hear you until you press that.
Okay, can you hear me now?
If you pressed it, you should be fine. I don't have the question, so you should look in the question panel too.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for anyone who's on this webinar to please type in if you can hear me. We're unsure if you're able to. Okay, great, people can hear me. Okay, so we had a little fear there that maybe no one could hear me, but it looks like people can. So we're gonna just continue on. Okay. So again, the presentation materials will be posted on the THP Plus website. That's right there on the screen, www.thpplus.org. So we'll just continue on. So today I'm joined by Amy Lemley. Some of you may know that Amy just in the beginning of this month transitioned out of her role as the longtime policy director of the John Burton Foundation into the new role of executive director. So if you didn't know, now you know. She joined us today on our call, and we're going to focus on a new opportunity provided by the John Burton Foundation, and we'll get into that in just a second, but we'll also be providing you some updates on the state budget and on the bills that we're sponsoring, and then lastly we'll talk really briefly about county policies on accepting out-of-county youth in THP Plus that some of you have been asking about. So this new opportunity that I referenced, the THP Plus and THP+FC post-secondary education training series, this is a targeted effort to improve the capacity of providers to support current and prospective college students in their programs. We know that while this is incredibly important, it's a significant challenge for providers in an environment where often the task at hand is kind of meeting immediate and basic needs. And also with a population that has had a kind of a challenged or a checkered academic history. And so we know that this is incredibly important and that it's really important to dedicate resources and really think about how we can better support this population with their educational trajectory. And so I'll go into greater detail a little bit later on our call, but over the course of the next year, we'll be taking a cohort of providers, THP Plus and THP+FC providers, through a training series. You could also call it a learning series or a learning circle where, in addition to training, cohort participants will have access to individualized guidance between trainings, and then their youth will have access to as-needed retention grants administered by the John Burton Foundation. And so before we talk about the training series, I'd like to turn it over to Amy and kind of back up a little bit, and Amy's going to talk a little bit about why we're doing the training series.
Thank you very much, Simone. And thank you everyone who's on the call. We're really very excited about this. If you could shift to the next slide. I want to just, as Simone said, step back and, oh, there should be one more before that. Yep, there we go. Why are we doing this? You know, we're the organization. We fight to increase the budget. We work to expand the number of providers. Why are we talking about post-secondary ed now? with THP Plus and THP Plus foster care, and there are a variety of reasons. I want to take a few minutes just to step through them. And really the first one is, for those of you who are THP Plus and THP Plus FC providers, the powerful role of housing. When I was the executive director at First Place, we used to laugh. We'd be like, you can be an employment program, an education program, a mentoring program, but people really, the power of a housing program, a program that provides your housing, where you have a key, where you have a place to lay your head, that is an extremely powerful intervention. It's a very powerful connection to have with an individual. And things can happen in the context of safe, affordable housing that can really happen in no other context. And so as housing providers, you really hold the key to something important. You have access, a kind of access to these young people that no other provider really does. And so we believe using that access to promote post-secondary education outcomes is a tremendous opportunity. The second reason we're shifting is we're not dealing with the same post-secondary education sector even 2 years ago. We really have an improved post-secondary education sector that understands the needs of foster youth. They know what a foster youth is. They know what the dependency system is. They have specialized programs within their systems. They have specialized resources within their systems. And so now more than ever, we actually have a very strong partner in our post-secondary education system in California. And I would particularly note, the CSUs and the UCs are amazing, but I would say our community colleges, the investment that they've made both financially, personnel, and through policy and regulation change, they're really teed up to serve more foster youth than ever. And so we want to capitalize on this better, more receptive post-education sector. The third thing that really led us down this path was new research. In the past, we said, well, why do foster youth fall out? We know the rates are very, very low, but we really don't know why. But thanks to several important new publications, we now know we are able to pinpoint this issue like never before. And we're going to talk a little bit about what one of the main drivers is, and that is something that our training series is going to focus on. But we were kind of in the dark a little bit. We told ourselves, oh, kids don't want to go to college. Well, we now know they totally do. And they think they're capable of it as well. We used to really not have a lot of information about why young people were failing, and that has changed tremendously thanks to the investment on the part of many wonderful foundations, great research groups, and the participation of providers and advocates who helped this research come about. The next thing is really our funders. These are the people, we say, oh, these programs have a rate. For THP Plus foster care, it's about $3,000 a month. For THP Plus, on average, it's around $2,400 a month. But we all know that we rely on the foundation community to add those extra components that really make a program go from good to great. And so what is our foundation community telling us? What they're telling us at the John Burton Foundation and many of you around the state is it's time for this sector to go beyond the safety net. It's about more than simply housing a young person. It's about more than keeping them out of the cold, keeping them off the street. And really, how do we move past a safety net mentality where we are, where we're happy with them simply being housed, and we create an expectation that they are engaged in some kind of meaningful post-secondary ed or career and technical education. The example I'll give to that is a presentation that I did in front of a group where we looked at the number of young people in THP Plus who were in college. It was around, at the time, around 1 in 5. Now, before I got to my conclusion, which how low that was, people were saying, that's pretty good. That's not bad at all. Which really, I'm not saying everyone shares that point of view, and I think many, if not most of you on the call don't, but it very much reveals a mindset that post-secondary education training is optional, that there is a world out there that is somehow supposed to absorb a worker that is not trained beyond high school. And so the funders are saying, go beyond the safety net. And I truly believe when we do, when we can show them that we're going to get additional funding for those extras in the program. And as we also know, the funder community is way past anecdotes. They're looking for hardcore metrics. And no longer do bodies in beds, any of you who run programs know you've got to show way more than that. So part of the goal of this effort is to give you the opportunity to really show what your programs are doing to meet the expectations of the funders and to land this money so that you can stay a robust program that is funded primarily with public funding, but also able to make the case to the private community, funder community. And the last thing I'll emphasize is really the number one reason we are all here whatsoever, and that is the long-term well-being of young people. We know both anecdotally and through a mountain of research that if you do not have post-secondary education training, even a short-term credential, you will likely live in poverty in the United States of America. Our industrial base has disappeared. There is no longer an economy that can absorb a worker that does not have some kind of post-secondary education training. And so when we are thinking about these young people when they're 25, 30, 40, 50, when we're thinking about their own retirement, what do they need? And what they need is post-secondary education training to snag those living wage jobs so that they can integrate into our economy and have a life with economic security and stability. That's the number one thing on all of our minds. The rest of this are nice to know, but the reason we're all here together is really that. And that's the main reason why we're really taking an emphasis that our organization has had in post-secondary ed, but really from a campus point of view, and bringing it to our housing part of the organization to say, let's really leverage that knowledge, everything we know about post-secondary ed, and bring it to the people who are serving these young people every day. So next slide, please. So what does the data tell us? And so what you have here is all of the different research that we've culled over the last year to try and understand, is this a good idea? Is this worth our time? Is this worth your time? And so we had a survey of providers. We had interviews with 9 providers and 6 county child welfare agencies. We really mined data from our THP+ and our THP+FC participant tracking systems. And then we complemented our research with findings from, the gold standard on transition-age youth, which is the Cal Youth Study. And I'm just going to briefly share what we found. So next slide, please. The first thing we found is that community college is the next natural step for most young people in THP+ and THP+FC. So when you look at the educational status of young people who enter these programs, the vast majority do have a high school diploma or a GED. So for THP+, it's 72% come with that credential in hand. And in THP+FC, 69% do. Now this makes sense because young people in THP+FC are younger. They are 18 years old versus young people in THP+ tend to be older. The average age is closer to 21. But this is really showing us that, while there are certainly young people who, need that, basic remediation, need to go and finish high school, that's not the experience of most young people. And because of that, that's not what most of our programs should be oriented towards providing. So really, they come to us, they're right and ready, teed up for community college. Next slide, please. So some really good news and some not as good news about what's happening in our programs. The good news is the programs are helping young people finish high school. So when we look at between entry and exit, the number of young people without a high school diploma does decrease from 24 to 21%. So we are trimming down the number of young people. Programs are finding young people that haven't completed high school, and they are reducing that number. However, college attendance is virtually flat. As you can see from that middle bullet, of young people who enter the program, about 1 in 5 are in college, and at exit, only 1 in 5 are in college. So we really are not making a lot of headway in our post-secondary ed enrollment. We're not moving it from, all right, when 1 in 5 at entrance are enrolled, but by exit we're at 1 in 2, or even amazingly 3 in 4. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. And so we're not, certainly the intention of this isn't to lay blame, or, but it really is to challenge ourselves and look at the facts soberly so that we can develop a better path forward. The third point is also part of the sobering part of the equation, is that dropping out of college is a significant problem. So at entry into the program, 9% of young people enrolled that they had enrolled in college and then disenrolled. And at exit, this figure doubles. So when we take these figures and we kind of add in the anecdotal interviews or the interviews with providers and counties, what we really hear is we're pretty good at getting them enrolled, but we're not doing that much after they are enrolled. We kind of expect that to happen at the college. And so that's the good news, is there is an emphasis on enrollment. The question now is how do we develop a broader program that goes beyond the enrollment and matriculation to really promoting retention. Next slide, please. So this is, the good news is, you know, when we ask providers, well, maybe you guys have it all figured out. Maybe, maybe you don't want this kind of support. Most providers did not say that. They 75% that said they were not fully satisfied with the approach they take to post-secondary education. And when asked, so what gets in the way? Why aren't we doing what we all know we want to do for foster youth in college? And why aren't the young people doing what they state they want to do? For those of you who have read the Cal Youth Study, you know the young people emphatically state, not do they only want to go to college, they want to go to graduate school. So they're not doing what they state they want to do, and many of our programs aren't helping them do that. So what gets in the way? And it's all the things we know about: drug and alcohol use, domestic violence, untreated trauma, educational delays. You know, it's really coming down hard and heavy in our programs. So that's kind of the disconnect. So the real question is, how do we bridge that? How do we bridge it and push through it and not stop our efforts when those very real issues present themselves? Interviews also uncovered a lack of staff training. And what we really heard a lot of is, you know, community college has changed. You know, you can't just show up a week before class anymore. I know when I was at First Place, I don't want to say we did it all the time, but we did it. And maybe I shouldn't admit that. We kind of just, you know, enrolled a kid, right? But with the Community College Success Act, which passed a number of years ago, the matriculation process has changed significantly. It really is a whole skill set, not just to enroll a young person, but to help them access the range of services that are available, as well as to support them in their retention. And that is really what this is about, supporting them in their retention. Next slide, please, Simone. The next slide is really, we asked in the survey providers to let us know what topics could we provide if you did participate in an intentional learning community over a sustained period of time. What do you want to know about? And so I won't go through this in detail, but you can see where the highest level of interest is, really taking a case management model and replacing it with an academic coaching model. So this is, you know, really using the time differently with young people. And that's a main emphasis of this effort. It's not to add personnel to your program. It's to change how your personnel are interacting with young people. Because we know any effort to add personnel that are privately funded, that money will come and that money will go. Our goal is how to use the existing rate to maximum effect. So a lot of other interesting things we learned through this survey. Organizational culture. how to really shift the mindset in organizations. So it's not if a child attends college, it is what program they shall be attending. Beginning to see young people, every young person, as college material. Now, I want to emphasize that doesn't mean they're college ready. That doesn't mean that they're going to, go into Algebra 1 and sing through the course. But getting every person in the organization to look at a young person and say, what are they going to attend, and how do we get them there, and how do we place that goal in the center of our service plan. So lots of other interesting findings from that survey. Next one, Simone. So when I emphasized the new evidence we have on the previous slide, what it really comes down to, the most powerful findings in the last 3 years are around financial aid, which for me is somewhat comical, because as someone whose parents helped me significantly during college, and as someone who knows that the #1 source of funding for college is parental income and savings, the idea that financial aid is mission critical, that is a finding, it's obvious, and yet it's surprising. It's obvious because those of us who did get help, but yet it's surprising how powerful the effect is. So here's just a few things on this slide. One is just 12% of foster youth who were surveyed, only 12% of young people in California get the Pell Grant and the Cal Grant. That is, 1 in 8 young people almost, and 100% of these young people are eligible. So this analysis was done by THP+. It is a world-class post-secondary education research organization, and so we are massively leaving money on the table there. The Cal Youth study also reinforced that. Only 1 in 3 young people received the CHAFE, and 1 in 3 did not even know about the CHAFE. So with this year's budget, we're very happy to have additional funding. But when we were doing that work at the state level, we heard over and over from young people, I got it my 3rd year, but I didn't get it my 1st year, but I didn't even apply for it because I didn't even know about it. So we're really seeing foster youth not getting access to the financial aid for which they're eligible. Next slide, Simone. And then further looking at financial aid. So really that the effect of financial aid is tremendously powerful. When you take all the services we do, all of the case management, all of the good work, those are all extremely important, but the one thing that has been shown to actually promote achievement and retention in post-secondary ed with the most powerful and persuasive evidence is financial aid. So it's an intervention in and of itself. And there's just also a real lack of understanding about how much of it is out there. We hear often, I would love it if our young people could go to college, but they have to work. But we know how much young people are earning, and we know how much financial aid is available. And they can earn more going to college than they earn than working. So that is factually true, and part of the training series is breaking down these sources of funding and giving you the tools to have conversations with young people who may not have had anyone in their life who has ever gone to college. They perceive it as a very elite experience, but helping them understand what the 4 most common sources of financial aid are, what they add up to. Because if your experience is like mine, young people in foster care are terrified of becoming homeless, terrified of losing their children to the foster care system, and they want to work, and they want to work hard to prevent themselves from having that experience. So it comes from a very good place, but how we have conversations with them to help them think that we share those goals around their economic stability, and that actually a different path and one that offers them more income in their pocket today, not more money in the future, but the one that puts more pocket in their money today is in fact post-secondary ed. The last 2 bullets here are just around CHAFE. So here in California, we have a way that we can compare students who receive CHAFE with students who do not receive CHAFE. And the great news is CHAFE is a very powerful tool, not just for retention, but actually increases the likelihood that they'll have a grade point average of 2.0 or higher. So again, we now have 1,000 more young people every year are going to get CHAFE due to this additional $3 million. The question is it going to get pushed out to the community? Is it going to reach these young people? And are we going to be working with them to make the case that this is an effort that they should be? So, you know, that's my summary of the research over the last year that the John Burton Foundation has done. There's a lot in here that we've done that's not in here, but this is what we felt were the most salient points. And this is why we're taking our time to retool ourselves. And we had a very reflexive kind of process as an organization where we said, you know, we need to stop fighting to keep this program in existence. It's not about existence anymore. It's going from good to great. And so this has been a challenge for us to retool ourselves and to make ourselves better understand a sector and to bring the knowledge on one side of our organization into this side of our organization. And so we really hope you will join us in this journey and this set of activities that Simone will be leading, and we feel like will be a very thoughtful exploration of expanding access to post-secondary ed for young people in these two housing programs. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Simone. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy, for all of this really great information and the survey that was conducted. I mean, that to me was just so informative in helping us shape the series. And I think that, you know, the information you provided is a really good frame, kind of framing why we're doing this. And also, I hope, you know, you all kind of are getting that we're really excited about this series, and we think that this is a really promising opportunity to really zone in, target in an education for this population. And so now I'll talk more about just the details and what is the training series. So as I briefly mentioned at the beginning of the call, this is a 9-month training series. It aims to improve the capacity of THP+ and THP+FC providers to support current and prospective college students. And then, you know, obviously the point of that is so that providers can then increase the number of youth they serve who are in college, the number of youth who are actually on track to achieving their educational goals. So, you know, not just taking a class here and there, but actually making progress toward that degree or that certificate. And the number receiving financial aid that they're eligible for, because as Amy just mentioned, that's just so key in making all of the rest of it successful. And so we're providing the training series and all of its components to providers free of charge. So kind of what does it consist of? There are really 3 main components that I'll go into individually in just a second, but those are monthly web-based trainings, individualized, targeted intersession guidance, so kind of a wordy way of saying we will support you on an individual level between the trainings, and so helping you work toward the goals that you're going to set in the beginning of the series. And then access to what I mentioned earlier, retention grants for youth participants who are at risk of dropping out or dropping classes because of a crisis that could be mitigated with financial assistance. So we'll talk about that first, retention grants. So these will be, you know, administered by John Burton Foundation to your youth or to the, you know, vendor or party that your youth needs the financial assistance to go to. And, you know, how many times has one incident, whether it's something that's under the youth's control or just a bad situation that they've gotten themselves into by no fault of their own, you know, really derailed their plans. If a youth from an intact home experiences a crisis, they have some sort of safety net. You know, even if it's not that their parents have, you know, a lot of income and they can help them out financially, they have a home they can go to for a backup, they have people they can go to. But for a youth who is just, you know, depending really on financial aid, and really is just connected to a system and not to a family. Sometimes, financial aid doesn't cover everything. And sometimes the check doesn't come in time to pay for a bill. We know that one little mistake can really, if it's unaddressed, it can, start to accrue interest. We know that, if a foster youth has to take out some sort of costly loan because they don't have other options, or they do have to do a payday advance, all of these things add up, and they kind of can get you into a mess. And as young people, college-age youth, we all made mistakes, I'm sure. But the key thing is, what is the result of that mistake? Is it going to mean not finishing school, or is it something that can be fixed? And so the retention grants are really an attempt to make sure that one mistake doesn't result in dropping out of school or dropping classes, going from full-time to part-time. And this practice of administering retention grants is not something that I'd love to take credit for it. We did not invent it. This is something that has been bubbling up and we've been hearing about for a little while as a very successful strategy. Schools and universities, some are doing it. And specifically, Georgia State University has really had really great success. We were looking at their kind of the data on what their retention grants has really done for their student body. So they used retention grants as a strategy to initially just address, they had more than 1,000 students who were being dropped from their classes for non-payment of bills each semester. Some of the balances were as low as, like $300 or something. And so of the seniors who received a retention grant, 70% graduated within 2 semesters of receiving that funding. And then since 2011, as you can see on the screen, Georgia State has brought more than 7,300 students back into their classes via retention grants. And then 88% of their students received retention grants graduated or are still enrolled a year later. So in the spirit of this trend that we're seeing at the college level, we thought kind of a mini version of it, specifically for THP+ and THP+FC participants, would be an important piece of this project. And we realized that, we're comparing a large university of the student body to a population of, current former foster youth, and that it's not, it might not be apples to apples. But we also know that looking at the data, that the practice of retention grants has been effective with low-income students, with students of color, with students that may feel disenfranchised from the rest of the student body because of maybe a lack of resources compared to many of their classmates. So in that spirit, we think that this is a really promising intervention for this population. So I'm going to advance the slide. So the next component of the training series, obviously the training. So the trainings are done via webinar, with the exception of one in-person kickoff that's happening in September. And the kickoff, I'm just going to briefly mention, so this is where the cohort participants will be identifying individual goals. So, is it about improving the number of youth enrolled in college, kind of straightforward? Or do you have kind of a good number of youth in college maybe, but you're realizing that they really aren't, they're only taking a couple courses. They're not really maximizing their time there, and they're not really on that road to a degree or to a certificate. They're just kind of taking classes. And while that's, they're doing something, it's really, we really want to support you, to support your youth in really realizing that goal, reaching that educational milestone. And, maybe you have youth attending school, but they're not accessing maximum financial aid. So these goals that are being set are really specific to each organization that's in the cohort. They're individualized, and they're meant to really meet the organization where they are so that they can meet their youth where they are. Excuse me. The web-based training will be strategically matched to the academic year so that providers can maximize the way that the knowledge is utilized and apply it as they learn it. So, and the resources as well. So just, for example, when it's time for youth to be completing the FAFSA, we'll be talking about that, and we'll be providing tools and resources specific to your youth completing the FAFSA. So this is all kind of real-time training. So, and I want to just, before I talk about the third component, give you a little sneak peek of what the looks like. Just to say, I want to, before we talk about this, at the John Burton Foundation, we've really had the privilege of having access to post-secondary education experts. John Burton Foundation has been leading the California College Pathways Project for a number of years now, and as many of you know, our California College Pathways Director, Debbie Rauscher, is extremely knowledgeable about this topic, and not just about post-secondary ed, but obviously post-secondary ed as it relates to foster youth. And also Devin Werble and Deborah Pruitt, who are also working on the California College Pathways Project, are extremely knowledgeable and resourceful about college and foster youth. So those three women, I'm so excited. We're really excited to be able to draw from our experience with California College Pathways really to inform this project and the training and the resources. And so in crafting the topics, we looked to the survey that Amy discussed earlier to really see, what it was that providers wanted more information about. So we, as you can see on the screen, the topics range, and they really cover the need to know things about post-secondary ed. So, the basics, kind of building interest in college and selecting schools, and that may sound more mundane than it is, but this is really about learning what are some very specific programs and new happening right now that were not available maybe even last year that would be really great and tailored to the population you're working with, and specific to, regionally too, like where are you located, what's where you are. So we'll really be tailoring these trainings to not just this is a training on, post-secondary ed as it relates to foster youth, but this is tailored for those that are participating in the cohort. Financial aid, obviously, and this will go, beyond the basics, and we'll really talk about some actual tools that you can use to really ensure that your youth are doing what they need to be doing to accessing maximum financial aid. Matriculation is something that you have to know about, and the assessment test, you have to know about these things if you are going to have a youth attending community college. Obviously, on-campus support, this ranges so much across the state, and there are campuses out there with some really creative, fun, amazing things starting to happen or that have been happening, but especially with KFEs, some new things. And then career technical education, there are some also really great new programs out there that we want to make sure everyone's aware of. And then incorporating academic coaching, that was the #1 thing that providers said that they were interested in, receiving training on when we surveyed providers last year. So that's just kind of a sneak peek at the training curriculum. I'm going to talk about the third component of the series now, and am getting some questions. People are asking about, what's the process to be part of the cohort. I will definitely go into that in just a few minutes, and then if you still have questions, we'll address them during the Q&A. And people are also asking about getting a copy of the PowerPoint. We will send a copy of the PowerPoint to you if you attended this webinar, but we also will have it posted along with the audio recording on the THP+ website under past trainings. And again, if you have questions, feel free to submit them now, and we'll get to them during the Q&A. So the third component is this individualized guidance. And what this does, it really connects with the goals that I talked about earlier that each participant is setting for their organization. So over the course of 9 months, to complement the training, we'll be working with participants to help them determine how they're going to reach those goals. It will, also connect to the initial assessment that we're going to have cohort participants complete, which really will figure out what areas each organization could strengthen to reach their goals. So where are the challenges really lying for that organization with post-secondary ed and their youth? And some may find that it's more about the onboarding process for new staff and training and making sure that case managers are more knowledgeable about post-secondary ed. Some, it may be rejiggering the program a little bit to provide some more academic support. It's really going to, again, it's about, I hate to say this kind of a catchphrase, but meeting an organization where they are so that you can meet your youth where they are. It's really an individualized situation. So let's talk about logistics. The way that we've structured this, and the way that we're kind of, I think the easiest way to look at this is there's really 2 tiers of participation. And we did this so that for those who either can't commit or aren't interested in committing or aren't eligible to really participating in the cohort, we have another option for those folks who can still access the trainings. So this Tier 1 is really for those who participate in the cohort. It is for THP+ and THP+FC providers. They'll be participating in the training. They'll receive the individualized guidance, and they'll have access to the retention grants. They will be required to use the THP+ or THP+FC participant tracking system, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then Tier 2 is for everybody else. So those who are not participating as part of the cohort but would like to attend the monthly webinars. We are not excluding you from these webinars. We want to make sure that this knowledge is as widely available as possible. So to be a little more eligibility for what we call the Tier 1 participation. As I mentioned, you've got to be a Plus or an FC provider. You've got to use the participant tracking system. So either if you're a Plus provider or an FC provider, there's a participant tracking system for each. And you just have to be using one or the other. And if you are not already a user, you can become one. So if you're not one today, it doesn't bar you from participation, but we ask that you would become one prior to the series. You've got to agree to participate in the series and dedicate one point person that will consistently attend the trainings. So you're welcome to have, obviously, as many people as you want attend the trainings, but we just want to make sure that there is one consistent person so that it really for maximum impact, so that person carries this knowledge and works on those goals, and it's it's consistent. And then, of course, you've got to have an interest in improving post-secondary educational outcomes for your youth, but that's a kind of a given. So we want to make a clarification here to avoid, I think this question would have come up. So for organizations that provide more than one, that provide services, either THP+ or THP+FC in more than one county, participation is what we call by program, not by organization. So if you provide services in one county, it's simple. You dedicate one person to the series, that's it. But Plus and FC providers are a diverse group of organizations. Some are small, some just do transitional housing, some are large, some are also FFAs and drop-in centers and other things. Some provide services in one county, some provide services in 3 counties, some provide services in like 15 counties. So we want to ensure that this training series really, like I said, has a maximum impact on your youth, on your program and on your youth. And so to do this, we've got to have participation by program, not by organization. If you're providing services across multiple counties, across multiple regions. So for an organization who provide services in 5 counties, for example, it's likely, that they'd have to, if they're having each program participate, they'd likely have to dedicate 5 people. But in some cases, for smaller counties, this may be a regional thing. They may have one, and I should have mentioned that, and it says it on the screen, but a program is defined as sharing a staff team. So in some cases, we know that organizations may provide services in 2 counties. They may have the same staff team that services both of those counties. They may be smaller counties. They may be able to, to operate as one program. In that case, one staff is fine. And it's really, we're not going to be sticklers. We're not like, oh, how many counties, and you've got to have that many staff attending. It's really about making sure that the maximum impact is made. So we can work with you, we can talk with you, see what makes the most sense, but I'll say kind of as a blanket, I don't want to say policy, but as a blanket practice here, what makes sense is per staff team having one staff member dedicated. And so, like I said, for many organizations, that'll mean 1 per county. For some, that might mean, 1 per, I want to say, region or geographic area. And so the timeline. So the application is available starting today, and then we're asking for it to be completed by August 10th. We'll be notifying organizations a week later, August 17th. And then our kickoff is in September. We have not tacked down a final date yet, but we will very soon have that, and it will be in Oakland. The webinars will run from October to May, and with the exception of December, we'll skip December for the holiday. And so applying, so if you are interested in participating in the cohort, and I hope many of you are, we are really excited. We really are looking forward to working with you all on this. The URL for the application is there on the screen. It's a SurveyMonkey. And then if you're just interested in attending the web-based training, you don't have to do anything. You're probably already registered. If you're attending today's webinar and you were the one who registered and it was, was sent to you, you're registered for these already, because we're going to use the same registration list that it's going to be this same webinar, second Thursday of the month. So you don't have to do anything if you're already registered. If you're not registered or you would like to share this opportunity with someone else and they want to get registered, the link is there. If you have questions at any point throughout, if you're online doing the application or if you have questions just at a later date, feel free to email me. And I will be out until this coming Tuesday, but this coming Tuesday and beyond, I will be available to you. And the applications, as I mentioned, are due the 10th. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass this back over to Amy. And before I actually officially pass it back over to Amy, I just want to remind everyone that the PowerPoint and the audio recording will be sent to everyone, or the PowerPoint will be sent to everyone, and the PowerPoint and the audio recording will be posted on the THP+ website under past trainings. And if you have questions to address during Q&A, go ahead and submit them now. Okay, Amy, go ahead and pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Simone. I am going to talk about these policy updates pretty quickly. Then we're going to, as Simone said, talk about out-of-county survey that we've been doing. And I want to give, and then talk about, and then address your questions. So it, by my clock, is 10:48, and so my sense is we may be going a little bit past 11 today. So if you need to drop off at 11, we understand this will be recorded and you can hear the last portion of it. But I don't expect it'll be past 11:05 or so. So just want to give you a preview there. So a lot of you are on our weekly email newsletter list, and so this will probably be old news. But we're delighted to share there is an additional $3 million in the Chafee budget, which is approximately 1,000 young people. Now, those of you who do math very quickly say, hey, the maximum Chafee is $5,000. But you also may realize that the Chafee money, the average grant, is just a little over $3,000 because that form of financial aid is applied after the Cal Grant and the Pell Grant, and so it really just fills in the gap. So we were not successful to date. We still have a bill around the entitlement, but the money, additional money is there, and that means a tremendous amount. So thanks to everyone who sent in letters and testified and came to the Capitol. So now we're going to use it and achieve great things with young people. Next, the infant supplement. So went from $411 to $900 a month, and really want to, again, thank everyone who was involved in that. First Place for Youth, a THP+ and THP+FC provider, was actually a co-sponsor of the bill and really brought this issue to life in a very powerful way through the young people they serve. So want to thank First Place and certainly Children's Law Center. That is effective immediately. So there was a rates layer that went out, and young people who get the infant supplement, that rate is effective July 1st. We've gotten that question probably 10 times. And if you don't have the rate letter, let me know. We can also send a link to it. DSS is just spectacular in their issuance of the rate letter. It used to come out in August or later, and they had it out on July 1st. So that means real money in the pockets of young people sooner, and that means they're able to have their material needs met. So that's good news, and thank you to DSS for being so on top of that. Next, we have those first two we are very centrally involved with. The John Burton Foundation is a member of the Step Up Coalition, certainly not leading it. That's really led by the Alliance for Children's Rights. And it's $127.3 million for the implementation of the continuum of care. So this is, as I'm sure you're all aware, a multi-year effort to really improve the quality of foster care and create, strong settings for young people, group homes to step down into. So we're very pleased. Last year there was, I believe, 80 million, another 127 million. This year, this is not a cheap proposition, but the administration and the legislature are really putting their money where their mouth is, and it's going to be great for kids. Next is a one-time allocation of $10 million for bringing families home. And this is really recognizing the fact that for some families, the housing is a fundamental barrier for reunification. And so this is great to see that, and the Corporation for Supportive Housing sponsored that. So that was also in the budget. Next slide. The next one has to do with psychotropic medication. Those of you who follow this topic know that young people who take psychotropic medication require, considerable medical monitoring, and this $1.7 million is to hire the public health nurses to facilitate that, and the National Center for Youth Law and many other organizations, but really Nicolette has been leading this effort, and it's great to see that money there so young people can take these medications safely when necessary. And then another part of the state budget is $5 million to continue the implementation of a statewide program to address commercial sexual exploitation among children and youth in care. And so that brings the total funding to this program to $19 million. On the bill side, so the budget is now done. It's required by the state law, or actually the state constitution, to be passed. But the bills process continues through the end of September with a deadline for the governor to sign or veto bills in early October. So the legislation is there's lots of bills still making their way through the legislature. They've now gone from the first house to the second house, and the ones we're going to highlight are really just the ones that we are involved in. We couldn't have time to go through the whole list of them. Assembly Bill 2506, authored by Assemblymember Tony Thurmond, and this again has to do with CHAFE. It would actually make CHAFE an entitlement so that a young person would be guaranteed a grant if they apply by a certain date, and that is going to be heard in appropriations. And then 1838, which is a great bill, authored by Assemblymember and Chair of the Budget Committee, Phil Ting from San Francisco, and this would actually bring, it's been amended very recently, that would make the infant supplement available 3 months prior to the birth of the child. So we now have an infant supplement that's $911, and we're trying to make that resource available to young people prenatally. We do have 1 in 3 young people who have children who have no prenatal care, and the hope is that earlier initiation of this benefit will promote earlier receipt of prenatal services and a range of other services. So that's exciting that these are still alive. And then lastly, next slide, Simone, is Senate Bill 906, and this would institutionalize, in the best sense of the word, priority registration for foster youth. Earlier when we were talking about our improved post-secondary education sector, this is just one example of what they've done. And for those of you who think, priority registration, what's the big deal? It reduces the amount of time to transfer, reduces the amount of financial aid and loans that are required. This is a policy that has a direct benefit to foster youth in higher ed. It did have a sunset, and Mr. Bell's legislation would remove that sunset permanently, so this would be permanently part of state law, and then also broadens the definition somewhat and aligns it with the CHAFE definition. So we're delighted that this legislation is still alive. So again, there's much more that's being considered. These are just the bills that we're involved in. If anyone has any questions about other ones or about these, we're happy to to answer those. So over to you, Simone, to talk about out-of-county, and then we'll get to those questions about the training series.
Thanks, Amy. And we will try to, I'm going to try to get us as close to 11 o'clock as possible. So I will be as brief as possible. So as many of you know, people have recently expressed interest in knowing what counties' policies are for accepting out-of-county youth in their THP+ programs. When from we know that they do not always remain in their county of origin. Sometimes they move for school or for a job or because they may have ties in a different community. Sometimes they're having problems in their community that make it unsafe or unideal for them to stay. We hope it's for a positive reason. There are a range of reasons why a youth would maybe move. Sometimes when youth apply for THP+ in another county, they do have problems accessing services. And that's because, you know, some counties accept out-of-county youth and some don't. And then some, oops, I did not mean to do that yet, so let's go back. And then some accept them, but there are stipulations attached. So just to clarify, you know, each county receives, I'm just going to back up here about THP+ funding real quick. Each county receives a set allocation, the amount that was set with 2011 realignment when THP+ was realigned from the state to the county level. Each county's THP+ allocation the year prior to realignment became their permanent THP+ budget. And this amount must be spent on THP+. If the county wants to, and you've heard us say this many times, if the county wants to reduce the spending, their THP+ spending by 10% or more in any one year or by 25% or more over the course of 3 years, they've got to get it approved by their local county board of supervisors. So this money has to be spent on THP+ otherwise. And THP+ is a statewide program, so counties can choose to serve youth from other counties with their allocation. And this is just a little plug for maybe for those who aren't doing that to just consider it. You know, if you are underspending that allocation, it is a way to spend that allocation and at the same time help homeless youth who may be from other counties that have waiting lists. So just something to think about. So that being said, we created this list. This was something that many of you requested. We've compiled a list of county policies on whether they accept out-of-county youth in their THP+ programs. So just to clarify, this is not THP+FC. Totally different process. That's a foster care placement. This is THP+. And so this is really so that youth providers and counties can refer to this. And this list is now accessible on the THP+ website at the little URL you see on that dark gray box. And then I want to mention, you know, Mariposa County kindly reached out and requested that we share with all of you that they are accepting referrals and that out-of-county youth who reside in our county and who are in need of housing should apply. So I've included their referral form as a handout on GoToWebinar that you should be able to download it from your control panel. There should be a section that says handouts and you should be able to download it. I can also include it in the follow-up email that I send. But I wanted to make sure and mention that for any youth who maybe have a reason to move to Mariposa or that are living there and that are in need of THP+ housing, that they are accepting referrals and they will take youth whose county of origin is not necessarily Mariposa. So at this point, we can move on to a quick Q&A session. I'm going to dive right in here. The first question is, do you have to be part of the cohort to qualify for the retention grants? So yes, you do. That is correct. In order to qualify for the retention grants and for that individualized guidance, you need to be part of that cohort, yes. The second question is about, someone's asking whether the budget request that we had, the THP+ budget request that would increase the budget so that youth would make a modification on eligibility so that youth could access THP+ who had actually been in foster care after age 16 as opposed to been in foster care on their 18th birthday or after. It would have been 16th birthday or after. So that budget request, as you guys know, I sent you all an email. It did not go through. It did not make it into the budget. As you know, it wasn't one of the things that Amy mentioned earlier in her policy update. So the question was, are we going to be revisiting this in upcoming years? And so the answer is maybe. You know, we are right now working on setting our policy agenda for the next year. And this is something that we've definitely discussed. It's important. One thing I'd love to ask of all of you is for your input. You know, we create a policy agenda based on the needs that we identify, and we identify needs based on input from providers, based on data, based on, you know, basically what's going on in the direct services world, right? So let us know what's important to you. If this is something that's important to you, shoot me an email, give me a call. We'd love to talk with you about what you think are important things to include in our policy agenda. And you'll notice if you're completing the THP-Plus and THP+FC annual report survey that our policy intern Christian has sent around, that there is a question about this issue in that report. The reason for that is because we really need data. We need strong data we can rely on to be able to demonstrate that there's a need for this. And so one of the reasons that we think that the budget request maybe wasn't successful, maybe we didn't have enough data. So that's one thing that we're doing, is we're trying to look into that a little further and be able to strengthen our argument there and make sure that we're, you know, standing on 2 feet. So please answer that question in the survey. And Amy actually has an announcement that she'd like to make that we'll just pause for a second.
It is something that the folks at IE Communications had asked me to share this with you, and I'm really glad that they did, because I think it's an important complement to the Cal Youth Survey. For those of you who are familiar with that, that's Mark Courtney's survey. But essentially, the survey includes a youth component above and beyond this survey that's conducted, and it's called Cal Youth in the Loop. And this is a way where young people are actually providing feedback on what is being found. I think it's a very interesting component that'll really enrich our understanding of youth experience in California. And so they're asking us to share that information with you, and I just want to highlight it. I want to let you know it's going to be in our follow-up email, and I know you guys are doing a lot of things on multiple fronts with young people, but if you can, we would really appreciate it if you would share it with your young people to give them a chance to react, to see how these findings are resonating with them. And so that was the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I got in before we wrapped up.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to jump into our next question. For out-of-county THP+, if a youth is accepted in a different county, which county pays the monthly rate for the youth? The original referring county or the county in which the youth will reside? Great question. So it is done both ways. Most commonly, the youth is, the county where the program is providing that service and covering and paying, covering that youth financially as well. There are, you know, I have heard of instances where a county will pay for a youth to be in THP+ in a different, you know, for a provider in a different county. But what we're talking about here generally is when a county, so we'll just use Mariposa as an example. If Mariposa County, if an Alameda County youth is in Mariposa County, Mariposa's housing slot that they pay for, that Alameda County youth is in that slot that's paid for by Mariposa. But there are instances where it's done in other ways as well.
What I would say, what I would add to that is we have a lot of counties where they're rural, they have an allocation, but they don't have enough money to create a whole THP+ infrastructure. So those counties are ripe to do what Simone is talking about, which is to support the participation of a young person in another program. So for example, a young person's in Del Norte, or you know, a far north, or just a place that may, and I think Del Norte has a program, so my apologies for that, but a program that doesn't, I mean a county that doesn't, but they do receive an allocation. They are deeply concerned about the transition experience of their young people, and perhaps a young person is going to college somewhere or living somewhere. So that is a ripe opportunity to reach out to the county, and you know that they have an allocation, you know what the allocation is, to get that money to follow the young person.
Shasta is an example that doesn't, that no longer has a THP+ program of a smaller county. And thank you, Amy, for that clarification. That was really helpful. can you give a list of dates for the 9 seminars? We will send that out, but it is they will continue to be on the second Thursday of the month, with the exception of December, which we will not be having one. And please repeat the application info, email, or website. We will also be sending that in the email. And I'm going to there's one other question about are we posting the last week's book scholarship webinar online? Yes, that will be posted online. Amy, which website will that be on?
That is on our main John Burton Foundation one, and we'll include a link to that.
Okay, great. And then I think the last question we'll take here, and this is, did you say that non-THP Plus providers can only participate in webinars and not individual support? So yeah, so if you are not a THP Plus or THP+FC provider, you are not eligible to participate in the cohort that receives the individual support, just because this is a targeted training series for those providers. And I think what we will do is end there, because we are at 6 minutes after. Amy, do you have?
No, just thank everyone for being here, and I also want to really acknowledge 2 things. One is the California Foundation was the entity that provided us with the planning grant to do all of this analysis, and gave us the time and to really set aside to do the surveying. And so I want to thank the California Wellness Foundation for that, and also just to really acknowledge Simone. Coming back to John Burton, we're delighted in the role of Associate Policy Director and really excited about her leading this effort. I think it's going to be a big success. So thank you, Simone, for all the work you've put into it and that you're going to put into it.
Oh, well, thank you for that, Amy. I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a really actually fun and interesting experience for everybody. And so we will end there. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll be following up with an email.